Hello and welcome to another episode of the Rotoworld Fantasy Baseball Show. I'm your host, Eric Samulski, joined by a special guest today. It's Christopher Torres from the Fantasy Baseball Beat podcast. Friend of mine that I used to have on the podcast a lot when we did Catcher's Corner back in the day. I don't like that he's wearing a Yankee hat, but I do appreciate his New York love. Chris, how you doing?
I'm good, man. Always a New York love, bro.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for having me on. Super excited to be talking to you today. Very cool to be filling in for Scott. You know, Scott was really the person who he taught me how to play fantasy. He doesn't know who the hell I am, but I've been a huge fan of his work forever since he was at Yahoo. I would always be there for his Sunday night chats when he used to have them back on Yahoo. That was like a fixture of my week. So, you know, he's always thought about the game, I thought, in such a smart way. And I always, like, from the minute I started playing fantasy, I had always gravitated towards his content. So, Scott, if you're listening, thank you for all of your work. And it's really cool to be filling in for you here today.
Yeah, and I hope you're listening. Just because you're off today doesn't mean you shouldn't see what the podcast is doing when you're not here,
Seriously.
Scott. But no, it is. I feel the same way about co-hosting with Scott. It's been awesome, even just like and filling in for DJ too, in his role. It's been cool. They're all awesome people, and I'm excited for people to hear more people to hear you. Tell us just very briefly, tell people about the Fantasy Baseball Beat, and then we're going to get into the news and notes and a lot of the top waiver wire pickups from the weekend.
Yeah, so I host a podcast called the Fantasy Baseball Beat. We are part of the Triple Play Fantasy Network. So wherever you get your podcasts, if you put in Triple Play Fantasy, we are part of that podcast feed. We started this podcast about a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, actually. I co-host it with my good buddy Mike Carter, who writes over at Fantrax and at Rotoballer. So what we do, the main premise of the show is that we interview MLB beat writers, and we're doing these interviews from a fantasy focused lens, and we're trying to get our listeners the best information that's going to give them an advantage in their fantasy leagues. So we also incorporate some non-baseball stuff into it. We have like a mental health minute where we talk about some things that are very Mike and I are very passionate about. We're both working in the mental health field. So we try to have everybody walk away from the show feeling like they've gained something. So I encourage you to check it out. We do it once a week, and we'd love to have you listening.
Yeah, it's always great to get that insight from the beat writers. And the beat writers are obviously such a big part of what we do at Rotoworld, since we use a lot of their Twitter reports for, our player news and stuff like that. And there was tons of news to get to over the weekend. We got to start with the Dodgers. We'll start with Mookie Betts. Hit by a pitch, fractured wrist. So far, right now, all we know is it is not season ending. We don't know if that means postseason. We don't know if that means regular season. Obviously the Dodgers are they'll find out as they do more testing. The Dodgers have said that they're probably for right now going to go with a combination of Kike Hernandez, Miguel Rojas at shortstop. I guess my two-part question for you is, we're just putting Betts on the IL and putting him on your bench in NFBC formats until we have more information, correct? And
Absolutely.
Do you think Rojas or Kike Hernandez has any fantasy value, because they haven't been huge fantasy guys in the past?
Well, as far as Miguel Rojas, Jazz Chisholm probably is not picking him up in his fantasy league, and I think he's right. You probably shouldn't be either. I really think Rojas is just a deep league play, 15 teamers and up. I mean, I guess if you want to play him they've got a 4 game series here in Coors Field, so he's probably going to play at least 3 of 4. So there, I think Rojas is viable, but really he's going to be hitting at the bottom of the lineup. Doesn't hit the ball hard, can chip in some steals, but he's not really a huge asset there. Give you a decent average, but that's about it. And honestly, I think that the Dodgers are going to make a move. I don't think
you'd expect so.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be the long-term shortstop there. As far as Kike, I don't think his role changes that much. I think he's going to stay kind of a short side platoon guy, bouncing around shortstop, the outfield a little bit. So I don't think there's a lot of fantasy relevance in terms of how we're going to play this Mookie Betts injury.
Yeah, and for those wondering, no, Miguel Vargas does not play shortstop. Just went back through his minor league game log as well. There are no shortstop innings there. So unless the Dodgers were going to go back to playing Gavin Lux at shortstop and then put Vargas at second, I don't know that this makes any meaningful difference in terms of Miguel Vargas getting playing time with the Dodgers. I know that he's getting called back up. I can't see a scenario in which we're saying, oh, this is the opportunity. Kevin Biggio also has 1 inning at shortstop in his major league career. So I know they just got Kevin Biggio last week. I don't think that they're going to play him at shortstop. But then again, I would have said they're not going to play Mookie Betts at shortstop like a year ago. So who knows what the Dodgers will do? I don't know if you disagree, but I feel like with Vargas and Biggio, this doesn't really move the needle for their fantasy value.
No, I don't think so. Biggio probably just stays that short side platoon bat and probably bouncing around to different positions. Miguel Vargas, I mean, I think he just really needs a trade at this point. I think he needs a change of scenery. I don't think this impacts him much. You know, it's as fantasy gamers, we kind of wish cast on these players like a Miguel Vargas or an Edward Olivares, you know, like remember last year with Olivares, like, why isn't he playing? Just give him an opportunity. Usually these teams see something in these players, or there's a reason why they don't give it to them. Even Olivares this year, we thought maybe in Pittsburgh he'd be unlocked, and same deal again. So I don't see it happening right now for Vargas with the Dodgers. I think he's probably a piece that they move at the deadline, and then we'll see. But I mean, the early returns haven't really looked great in the majors, so I'm not really getting too excited about him, at least for this season.
And we said that with the Dodgers last year with Michael Busch, right? They just need to unlock Michael Busch. And a trade has done that. It hasn't been as, it's been fine, but it might be the same for Miguel Vargas if he goes somewhere else. The other big injury with the Dodgers was also a strained rotator cuff for Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Again, the Dodgers have said not season ending, but beyond that, at this point in time, Monday afternoon, we do not know any sort of timeline or duration. This is a guy who, on talent, probably a top 10 starting pitcher in Major League Baseball. I know there were some fantasy starts that were not to people's liking earlier in the year, but the stuff is definitely there. He is the type of guy that clearly hold on the IL. I believe hold on your benches in like an NFBC format where there are no bench stashes or there are no IL spots unless we get news that he's going to be back for the playoffs, or he might be back for like the last 3 weeks of the regular season. Like anything that's, especially with pitchers, anything that is like, hey, he might make a couple starts at the end of the regular season. Those situations, I tend to feel like IL spot, fine, stash him till you can't. NFBC format, if I was told Yamamoto is going to make 2 or 3 starts at the end of the year, I might move on if I really needed that spot, because you have to assume that those are not going to immediately be full length starts, especially since we're assuming the Dodgers are going to make the playoffs. And so the final starts of the season for him would be tune-ups heading into the postseason. They're not going to run him out for 7 innings, right off the IL before the playoffs. So you might be looking at like a couple 4, maybe 5 inning starts. So I don't know if you differ, but I just think keep an eye on what they say the timeline is. Hold for now and keep an eye on what they say the timeline is, because pitchers, 3 weeks of Mookie Betts is different for your fantasy team than 3 starts of Yamamoto to end the year.
I agree. I think you have to wait probably. I mean, within the next week here, I imagine we're going to get a more clear timeline. I was looking, shout out to Dr. I don't know him personally, but Dr. Jesse Morse has a good Twitter account. He runs an account called Injury Experts, and he does a lot of really in-depth breakdowns on these major injuries. And for Yamamoto, he was saying that it's going to be at least a month that he's going to be out, and that's going to be kind of the good range of outcomes there. So yeah, I'm holding, but in my mind, I'm kind of mentally preparing that I'm not going to get a whole lot out of Yamamoto the rest of this season. Like you said, the Dodgers are playing for the playoffs. That's all that really matters. So they have no reason to rush him back. Maybe they give him a couple starts in September to ramp him up, but yeah, I'm not feeling too optimistic about him. So like if I have him in a trading league, I'm probably going to be aggressive and try to shop for pitching, because again,
Yep.
I'm mentally preparing for he's not going to give me much the rest of the season. And I think it's the case with the other player we're about to speak about.
Well, that's what I was gonna say. If you're shopping for pitching, are you shopping for his own teammate, Clayton Kershaw, who is going to be starting a rehab assignment this week? Now, again, we're starting a rehab assignment with Kershaw. We're starting ground zero, right? Had the shoulder capsule injury. He's going to be built back up for a while. The expectation as of right now is sometime towards the second half of July. And again, Dodgers playing for the postseason. Is it 5 innings at a time for Kershaw? Maybe he can push to 6 or 7 if he's cruising. What are your expectations for Kershaw? And as a fantasy manager, like, are you trying to stash him anywhere?
I am. I think, with Kershaw, though, we're really going to have to pay attention to where his velocity is at in his rehab starts. I mean, that was really the thing at the end of last year. It all fell apart, and it was probably because of the injury that his velocity was way down. So I think we're just going to see if he's back at his normal kind of like 91, 92 mile per hour fastball, then I think, we could feel pretty good about Kershaw the rest of the way. I mean, let me remind you, the first half of last season, Kershaw had a 2.76 ERA and a 1.05 whip. Like, he was a top 25 starter. It's easy to forget about that because of how poorly it ended, but we really aren't that far removed from him pitching like an ace. And again, it all fell apart because of the injury. So I recognize that he's 36 years old. He's coming off of a shoulder injury, but just given who he is, given the context of where he's pitching, I'm willing to make a bet on him being a fantasy asset in the second half of the season. Extraordinary athletes do extraordinary things, as we see time and time again. And obviously, Kershaw is a first ballot Hall of Famer. I believe that there's still, I still feel that there's another run in him, especially, I mean, he wants that ring, right? Or another ring at least with the Dodgers here. So like you said, they're probably not going to push him, but if we're getting 5 innings of Kershaw on the Dodgers, I think that's still going to be very valuable, even in 12 teamers.
That's an important part to consider is like, not all 5 and dive pitchers are created equal, right? A 5 and dive starter on the A's who is like a 3.9 ERA guy is not the same as Clayton Kershaw on the Dodgers, a guy who's had an ERA over 3.03 one time since his rookie season. Once. This man has been, his rookie season was 2008. So since 2008, he has had an ERA over 3.03 one time. Like, you're gonna get good stats. I don't think that he's on the mound unless he is going to be effective. And the difference between him and like Max Scherzer, who we know is also coming back, is like Kershaw's been 91 miles an hour since like 2017, 2018. Scherzer's having to learn a new way to pitch without the velocity he used to have when he was younger. Kershaw doesn't need to adapt for diminished velocity in his older age. Like, he has always been command and control and a deep arsenal of pitches and mixing and matching and hitting spots and whatever. So, like you said, provided he's still in the 90 to 91 range, I don't believe you should expect that much difference from him. But with shoulders and all things like that, like, you just need to see if his command, if he feels as loose and his command feels as good, and you'll know that in a rehab start, right? Like, if you see in rehab, like, his breaking pitches aren't crisp, he's not hitting spots, you'll know before. But I think it's not a bad time in IL leagues, if he's available in an IL league, to go stash him now. In an NFBC format, I think you might be a little bit out in front still. Like, I still think you're like over a month away from him coming back. But again, it depends on if you have no other stashes and your bench is looking good and your team is looking good, then yeah, maybe you can use that spot for him. Corbin Carroll, we'll go to this one pretty quickly because he's getting an MRI on his oblique, but he said he feels fine. And he expects to play in the next series in Washington. he felt some discomfort in the left side of his rib cage after making a throw. Anytime you're dealing with obliques, you just want to be cautious because baseball is such a rotational sport. By the time you listen to this, if it's on Tuesday or something, you may know more than we do. At this point, it doesn't seem like there's anything major going on here. Maybe he misses a game or two as of what he's saying. But Kyle Bradish is back on the IL with strained UCL. It was what put him on the IL to start the season. We knew that he didn't get surgery. He was going to go like a rest and rehab route. They have not officially said that he's out for the season, so we will get more information. But in leagues where you have Bradish, do you think this is it? And do you think then the Orioles make another trade, or are they happy with Cade Povich, Cole Irvin, Albert Suarez?
Yeah, this injury isn't just baddish, it's probably awfulish. Second time this season he's going on the IL with this injury, as he missed spring training in the first month of the season because of it with the sprained UCL. I'm not optimistic. If you drafted him in late March, you probably got a nice discount on Bradish. And I think it was the right move to take that discount, given the quality of pitcher he is and he's shown to be so far this season. But you had to know this was always a strong possibility. When you have these UCL injuries, it's very rare that a pitcher can go long-term without it becoming something more significant. And I would be surprised if it's not a Tommy John or some variation of that we're looking at here. I like with Yamamoto, I'm holding because I think Bradish really is that good.
Right.
If you look at all the numbers that he's posted so far this season, I mean, he's an ace in my opinion. But I want to get a little bit more information, but I'm also with Bradish just mentally preparing that I'm not going to get much more out of him this season. For the Orioles, it looks so Dean Kramer is on a rehab assignment. He'll be back in about 10 days. So he would, I guess, take that spot in the rotation. And then that's going to leave Cade Povich and Albert Suarez to kind of fight for that fifth spot. And I will talk a little bit more about Povich. I think it's really going to be an audition here over the next month between those two as far as whether the Orioles make a move. I've heard someone on Twitter posted Garrett Crochet as a possibility for them. Sure. And as a Yankee fan, oh boy, I really do not want that to happen because I think that's really the type of move that would put the Orioles over the top here. So I think they're going to see what they have with these two pitchers, but certainly would not be surprised if they go out. They've got the prospects to make a move. They've got the team that's ready to win now. So I certainly would not be surprised if they go ahead and do that.
The interesting thing that you mentioned Crochet is that reports came out this weekend also that with the struggles of Cedric Mullins, that the Orioles are also in the market for a center fielder. And Garrett Crochet has a teammate who plays center field who is also on the trade market. It would take a big swing for the Orioles to get both Luis Robert and Garrett Crochet in a deal. But if there's one team that has the prospects to take that big swing, it's the Baltimore Orioles. Now, are they going to do it? Who knows? The Burns deal was a big swing name-wise, but because he's in the last year of his contract, they didn't really have to part with any of their like immensely top guys. If you're getting Garrett Crochet and Luis Robert, you're parting with, multiple of those names that we've come to know who are just sitting in AAA and raking. But it's certainly a situation, to monitor. I can't imagine that two of Cole Irvin, Cade Povich, and Albert Suarez are in this rotation at the end of the season. And so it's just what direction they go in is anybody's guess. We're staying within the division. We have elbow inflammation for Yimi Garcia, who was filling in for Jordan Romano, who has his own elbow injury. And I know Jordan Romano has gotten his injections, but he's only throwing from 90 feet right now. I don't necessarily think that Romano is imminently returning. And I also don't believe that, much like in the Bradish situation, that he's going to be a picture of health. He's had battled his arm injuries this whole season and doesn't seem right. My understanding from reading beat writers and, reading Greg Jewett's stuff over at Reliever Recon is that it's probably going to be Chad Green in the immediate for the Blue Jays. And Nate Pearson is an interesting guy to keep an eye on. He picked up a 1-out save last night when he had to come in. Former top prospect as a starting pitcher, really good velocity, had reliever risk due to injuries and control as a starter, but there was always kind of the thought that he could be a really good high leverage reliever. I do think that he will enter the late inning mix for the Blue Jays, whether that's the 7th, 8th, whatever. But he could be a sneaky little spec if I mean, we know who Chad Green is at this point. He's pitching well. He deserves to be added. But I think in deeper leagues, like taking a gamble on a Nate Pearson might not be a bad idea.
I agree. I'm kind of kicking myself because when I saw the injury yesterday, I just thought, oh, well, Chad Green is probably the guy. And I put a small bid in on Green. I didn't win him, but I didn't even think about Nate Pearson. And the more I look into it, I think Green's going to get the first shot, but I think it's important to note that the skills that Green has displayed so far have not been in line with the skills that he's shown in recent years. I mean, the K rate is way down. He's not getting the swing and miss. So far, the surface numbers look pretty good because I think he has a 100% left on base rate. So I just don't know. And the other thing with Chad Green is that the guy's always injured. I couldn't believe looking back his past 2 years. Do you know how many innings he's combined for?
I'm staring, so I'm cheating, but tell the people.
Yeah, like 30 innings, right? I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. And then he already had an injury this season. So I don't know how optimistic we could be that Chad Green is just going to take this role and run with it, whether it's because of effectiveness or injury. So I think Pearson is definitely in a deeper league is someone to take a spec on. The skills have been solid. It seems like the Blue Jays have been very hesitant to put him in that type of position, maybe because of his injury history. But I think now's the time. He's 27 years old. This guy's a former top prospect. You've had him in your system forever. Like, why not just see what you have and see if you could turn him into, a really good high leverage or pitcher or, like a lockdown closer. I don't know what the future is for Romano. I mean, that's not looking great. So I think I wouldn't be surprised to see Pearson get a shot here.
And this is a team that's like flirting with the idea of hitting reset, right? I mean, you hear rumors about trading Vlad Guerrero. Like, I don't know if it's going to happen, but if you are interested in seeing if this guy could be a closer for you in the future, this could be an opportunity to give him that shot. Let's go to your team for a second. Not necessarily because Anthony Rizzo getting hurt is damaging to the Yankees. He hasn't really been playing all that well. Claims it has nothing to do with the head injury from last year, and maybe it doesn't, but it does line up a little bit. But Rizzo is getting imaging on his wrist. The Yankee players seem to suggest they expect him to miss time, that he never appears as hurt as he is right now. Do you think that this leads the Yankees to make a trade? Because they have a gap at first base, and they have said that they were not going to, move on from Rizzo, but this could force their hand. Somebody like Josh Bell seems like a logical trade candidate. Or, the Yankees have a catcher first baseman now in AAA named Ben Rice, who was just recently called up to AAA, but he's been hitting really well. Do you think they just go internally? What's your take on what your team is going to do from here?
I think in the short term, you're going to see LeMahieu shift over to first base, and they're going to put Oswaldo Cabrera back at third, which is super boring and what nobody wants to hear. But I think they're just going to, stick with what they know. I mean, Cabrera did an admirable job filling in at third base earlier this season, cooled off, but I think they're going to give him another opportunity here. I just think they have to make a move, man. Just as strictly as a fan, like you cannot, like you are all in this season, right? Like everything is lined up. You're getting Cole back. Everybody's healthy. Judge is having another amazing year. Like you got to push all the chips in,
Right.
and you cannot go into the postseason with a combination of Anthony Rizzo, DJ LeMahieu, and Oswaldo Cabrera at your corner infield positions. You can't do it. So I think, a guy like Josh Bell could definitely be a fit. One guy who I think would be absolutely perfect for them, but the team that he's on may be too stupid to actually try and get some assets. And that's the Colorado Rockies with Ryan McMahon. I think he'd
Yeah.
be a perfect fit. And you could do like a platoon with LeMahieu and Rizzo at first, because I really don't think they want to just completely ditch Rizzo, assuming this is not like a significant long-term injury. Like, they're paying the guy. I know they love him in the clubhouse. He's a leader on that team. So I don't think Rizzo goes away completely, but I could see them upgrading elsewhere so that they could at least give him less at bats against left-handers and just kind of mix and match with him. So I think a guy like McMahon, a left-handed hitter in Yankee Stadium, you could put him right behind Giancarlo Stanton in the lineup, aiming for that short porch. I think he'd be a perfect fit for them. But again, are
Yeah.
the Rockies smart enough to actually like look at their team and be like, well, we're not winning anytime soon, so let's capitalize on McMahon's trade value?
Yeah, that would be interesting to me. I think like the Giants are 2 games under 500. Would they trade Lamont Wade Jr., right? Who could fill in that left-handed hitting first baseman role um, for the Yankees? I know earlier on it would have been like, hey, should the Cardinals trade Paul Goldschmidt? But they're 500 now, and they're making a run a little bit. The Pirates could get rid of like Rowdy Tellez or Connor Joe. Do the Yankees want either of those guys? Like, who knows? But there's some interesting names out there.
A real quick note on Ben Rice, because I think he should be on people's radars. I would be surprised if they call him up. I mean, it's not like the Yankees are 10 games ahead. They're a game and a half ahead of the Orioles, with the Orioles coming to town this week. So it's like they need to win games. And I would be surprised if Ben Rice comes up and becomes,
Right.
a near everyday first baseman for them, because he came up as a catcher. He's playing first base this season in AAA, and he's hitting really well. So that's why Yankee fans are clamoring for him to come up. But again, I think I would be very surprised if they just throw him into that situation and let him sink or swim. The Yankees are not really in that position where they can afford a guy to kind of learn on the fly like that.
Yeah, I agree. One last piece of news from that same division: Addison Barger was called back up. Barger was called back up for the Blue Jays when they designated Daniel Vogelbach for assignment. He is a left-handed hitter. He sat Friday's game against a lefty. He played Saturday at third base. He played Sunday at right field. I don't know that this is like a 12-team league relevant move, but I think in 15-team leagues, this is a guy who was running a 19% strikeout rate and 15% walk rate at AAA, has a solid feel for the strike zone, might not hit, for a really high batting average, but like can get on base enough. And, the Blue Jays seem like they're interested in moving him around, that he might play nearly every day against righties. So nothing super like, hey, I have to go get this guy. But I think if you're in deeper formats and you want like that kind of multi-position player that you can move around, Barger could turn into that a little bit. I'm gonna we'll go with some quick hits, and when I'm done, you can tell me if there's anything that you think is worth doubling back on. William Contreras is being evaluated for a concussion after a play at the plate last night. You may know more when you hear this, what the result of that is, but that's something just to keep in mind. Wilyer Abreu for the Red Sox is starting his rehab assignment this week, so he should be back next week. Something to keep in mind, again, as you're making your pickups. He should be coming back. Joey Votto has started his rehab assignment for the Blue Jays, just in the complex league. So he is a ways away. He hasn't taken any swings against live pitching before Monday due to the ankle injury. But again, we're talking about a Blue Jays team that needs offense. It would be great to see him up. I don't know what we're going to get from him, but again, that is like 4, 5, 6 weeks away. Trea Turner is back today, Monday. They claim he's coming back. Max Scherzer will be back this week. Bobby Miller will be back this week. Those guys are probably all added everywhere, but just something to keep in mind as you're setting your lineups. Bobby Miller timing obviously is good with Yamamoto going down. The Trea Turner situation, keep in mind what it does to Edmundo Sosa playing time wise, that he could be a kind of a big playing time loser in that situation. And then Brendan Rodgers is doing all baseball activities for the Rockies. They haven't yet said when he's coming back or if he'll need a rehab assignment. It was just a hamstring injury. It seems like that's the end of the road now for Adele Amador, who was one of their top prospects, who was called up after 2 really good weeks in Double-A and has not done much at the major league level. That move is not official yet. Rodgers is close to coming back. He's not back, but I think Amador is somebody that when he gets demoted, feel free to move on. and Rogers joins the group of, Rockies we might get to later on, that when they're playing a week at home, feel free to pick him up, but they're not somebody you need to run out and get onto your roster. Anything you think needs to be added for any of those guys?
One thing to be aware of with Trea Turner is that he is coming off of a hamstring injury, which is really a bummer for fantasy, because I can't help but think the Phillies are going to really limit him on the base paths. I could be wrong on that, but it just logically, it doesn't make sense for them to have him push it with a soft tissue injury like that. Like we talked about with the Dodgers earlier, the Phillies have their eyes on October. They don't. They need Trea Turner ready to rock when they get to the playoffs. So I think if you're lacking in stolen bases because you lost Trea Turner for a while, I wouldn't necessarily count on him coming back and fixing that problem for you. And I'm in that position in one of my leagues where I've fallen way behind, and I'm unfortunately, it's a 15 teamer and there's not much out there. And I missed on someone we'll talk about later, and David Hamilton, kicking myself there. But I don't know if Trea Turner just hits the ground running literally. When he comes back.
Might take a couple weeks. We'll get to some of these top waiver wires ads, but before we do that, don't miss the Olympic tryouts for a chance to represent the United States at the Olympic and Paralympic Games from the 5th. It started on the 15th, 2 days ago, through June 30th. Noah Lyles, Simone Biles, Katie Ledecky, and more of America's best athletes compete for a spot on Team USA in Paris. Watch our country's brightest stars continue their quest for gold on Peacock and NBC. Again, that's the U.S. Olympic team trials now through June 30th on NBC and Peacock. We're getting into Olympic time, which is always fun. It's exciting. Waiver time is also always fun and exciting. Potentially, hit on a guy who's going to kind of stick on your team forever, or for the rest of this season at least. You alluded to David Hamilton, so I'm going to move him to the top. I had just kind of mentioned him in connection with one of his teammates who was one of the most added players. David Hamilton has kind of really emerged to the point where he's rostered in most leagues. He's 62% rostered in Yahoo, so he can still be rostered in more formats. In standard Yahoo 5x5, he is the 8th ranked player over the last month of the season. He's hitting 236 with 3 home runs, 16 runs scored, 8 RBIs, and 14 steals over his last 27 games. I mentioned him last year when he got a shot, and it was just one of those like, hey, the guy stole 70 bases in 2022, and maybe if he gets a chance. He looks really good of late. I think that like the Red Sox kind of simplified his approach at the plate, and he is really not trying to hit for as much power as he had tried at earlier points. He still has the power to hit maybe 10 home runs, but the speed is huge for him. He's probably not going to be available in a lot of formats. He was picked up in a lot of places a couple weeks ago, but if he is available, you should certainly be adding him. And I think it's also time to start adding Ceddanne Rafaela back, who's only rostered in 46% of Yahoo leagues. In again, Yahoo standard 5x5, he is the 33rd ranked player over the last month. He's hitting 293 over the last month with 3 home runs, 16 RBIs, 16 runs, and 5 steals. There is some swing and miss in his game. He has a long swing. He's a rookie. He's going to go through some cold spells. But both of these guys are playing every day and running. Well, Hamilton sits against lefties, but playing every day and running and hitting well. And they were two of the bigger names that I flashed as like guys who need to be on rosters right now.
For sure. And if you didn't know who David Hamilton was, if you watched last night, you got to know him. 4 stolen bases against the Yankees, 9 total for the Red Sox, which was just embarrassing. I think that's going to be a major problem. It's really weird how like nobody figure out that Jose Trevino can't throw anybody out on the base pass. It took like almost half the season. But yeah, that was ridiculous. And Hamilton was a huge part of that. I think the thing when he came up, I'm thinking like he's just speed only play, a guy who can't really hit. They're going to knock the bat out of his hands basically. And he's showing enough of a hit tool and enough power that they have to respect him. They have to respect the bat. And when he gets on base, I mean, he's stealing almost every time. So he isn't an everyday player, which kind of sinks. But, again, like he has enough value given how many steals he's given you. I think he needs to be rostered in all formats. He has been excellent for the Red Sox, and Ceddanne Rafaela as well. I think he's in a 10-teamer. I don't think he's quite someone you need to roster, but he's definitely someone who should be on all 12-team rosters. He's got a very weird profile. Have you ever looked at like his O swing and like his plate discipline metrics? Look horrid. Like
yes, and to be fair, they've gotten better. They're still not good. They've gotten better over the recent stretch, and that's like when a rookie knows he's going to play. Like his defense is elite, and they're just like you're playing. So he has the freedom to figure some things out. But yeah, he's trying to shorten his swing. His swing is long. He was chasing a lot of things outside of the zone. It doesn't look pretty. But this is a guy who was a top 40 prospect in baseball who is starting to figure it out a little bit.
Yeah, and if you put in his projection, I mean, the thing is he's got that power speed combo that we're always looking for. And his projection rest of season, if you use the Bat X, which I prefer for hitters, it comes out to the 150th overall player, 8 home runs, 15 stolen bases, 247 average, which isn't great, but again, like 22 home runs plus stolen bases, that's going to play in a 12-teamer.
Yes, absolutely, for sure. Interesting thing about David Hamilton, you mentioned he doesn't play every day, and he does sit against lefties. In 4 of the last 5 games that he has sat against the lefty, he has come in to either pinch hit or pinch run. So that's another situation where you're like, okay, it's not ideal, but I know that I might still get a stolen base. I might still get a run. I might still get something on the days that he's not in the lineup, which you can't say for the next guy, who is one of the most added players this weekend, which is Joc Pederson of the Arizona Diamondbacks. Joc Pederson is a guy who, we've done this dance with Joc Pederson for years now, back when he was with the Dodgers or when he was, on the Giants. We know that he's going to hit in the middle of the order against righties. We know he has the power to crush righties. We know he's going to sit against lefties. He has been the 46th ranked player over the last month in Yahoo standard 5x5, 278 average, 4 home runs, 3 steals, and he has 4 on the season, which is nice for, a guy who's primarily for power. 24 RBIs over the last month. He had 10 RBIs this week. I think this is a guy where, like, when you look at the schedule and you see they're playing a lot of righties, you can fire him up. Do you struggle to roster guys like this in an NFBC format where it's like weekly lineup locks? And I guess NFBC has the double, but do you struggle with guys like this in non-daily moves leagues? Because he's great against righties, but if they play a lot of lefties, it's really hard to play him.
I struggle with it, but I think Joc is good enough that I'm willing to put up with it. Me and Joc have done all the dances over the years. I mean, I have him every year because I do feel like he's always undervalued. And the same this year. Like after he signed with the Diamondbacks, he was still going at like pick 300 to 350. And I just felt like, and I play primarily 15-teamers. I think it's a little trickier in like a 12-team format, but in a 15-teamer, especially one in which you can at least do the midweek lineup changes, I think he's super valuable. And you're seeing that value that he can give you over the past few weeks. They've had a nice run here of mostly right-handed pitchers. And you said he's 46 overall player, I think, over the past month. He gives you a unique combo of power. And, a lot of guys who hit for power also have a lot of swing and miss, but Joc doesn't. So he's hitting the middle of that Diamondbacks lineup. He's going to drive in runs. So it can be a little frustrating, but again, I think he's good enough. If you are in a weekly league, though, I will say, if you can only set your lineup once a week, that's a situation where I probably am not too eager to roster him.
Yeah. But
if you are in a daily league, especially, but even one in which you can make a midweek lineup change, then I think Joc is pretty valuable.
Yeah, I fully agree on that. The full weekly ones are really difficult. To Joc and Jake Fraley and Ryan O'Hearn and all those guys, it can be really, really hard. You can maybe scoop them on a Sunday night if you see what the week looks like, but then it's like jettisoned right afterwards. I want to talk about one of the big pickups is also Tyler Soderstrom from the Oakland Athletics. This is a guy who is a big pickup in leagues where he has catcher eligibility. He did start 15 games behind the plate for the Athletics last year. He is now the Athletics' primary first baseman. So he hits in the middle of the lineup for the Athletics. He's the 47th ranked player in Yahoo formats over the last 2 weeks because he's hitting 342 over the last 2 weeks with 4 home runs. This is a guy who did run a 26% strikeout rate in AAA this year. So he's probably going to strike out 30% of the time or more. But he does have legitimate power, and he's hitting in the middle of the order and playing regularly as a first baseman. And that, if you can use him as catcher, I think is extremely valuable. But in deeper leagues, I think he's valuable enough just as like a corner infield type. But that catcher eligibility would make him even more valuable, in my opinion.
Yeah, he's a smash. If he's catcher eligible in your league, you're picking him up, I think, in all formats, even though he's on he's still a platoon player. He's not going to get in against lefties. We know the A's love to platoon, but the power that he's showing is just really, I mean, I can't think of any scenario where you don't want what he's putting up here. It's 60% hard hit rate over the past few weeks, 20% barrels. He's not striking out a ton here. I think he's just in a little bit of a hot streak, and you're definitely going to want to ride this while he's playing here and hitting the ball this well. I don't know if he was available in my 15 teamer, and I was kind of lukewarm on him again because it's like he's not going to get in there against any lefties, and I think he's going to cool off, and we're going to see more of that 30% strikeout rate that we're used to with him. So I wasn't going crazy for him, but yeah, catcher eligible, absolute smash.
Yeah, he's one of those, like, if you really need power in a deep league and the schedule sets up, great ad. And if you're in a league where he's catcher eligible, I think you're adding, because even if he sits against lefties, most catchers are playing 4 games a week, 5.
Right.
So if he's starting against all right-handed pitching, he's going to get you more total plate appearances than most catchers who are in these kind of like platoons would. We're also seeing a little bit of an uptick, even though Andrew Vaughn is only rostered in 38% of Yahoo leagues, which is surprising considering he's the 5th ranked player in Yahoo over the last 2 weeks and 76th ranked player over the last month. He's hit 5 home runs in the last 2 weeks while hitting 364, 12 runs scored, 12 RBIs over the last 2 weeks. We kind of always knew that Andrew Vaughn had power. And it's funny because Andrew Vaughn was Spencer Torkelson before Spencer Torkelson was Spencer Torkelson, in like, hey, this is the most college ready bat to come out of the draft. Okay, cool. White Sox are going to take him 3rd overall, and he's going to, zip through the minor league system, and he's going to just crush. And you're seeing a guy who's hitting 253 career average, which is better than Torkelson, but the power never showed up. Last year was a career high 21 home runs. But then you start to look at like 15 home runs his first year, 17 home runs his second year, 21 home runs last year. He's got 9 already in 67 games this year. That Vaughn is maybe slowly growing into that power a little bit, and it might not be the 30 plus home run power that people thought. But this is a guy with a 9% barrel rate who's starting to hit the ball hard. And sure, his team context isn't great, and it might get worse if Luis Robert is traded. But you could do a lot worse than having Andrew Vaughn at your corner infield spot in deeper leagues right now.
For sure. I think we're seeing he started off really bad, and I think people were just, especially in 12 teamers, were just dropping him. I think he should be rostered in I think you said 36%. That's too low in a 12 team league, or, he's good enough. Like, he's not going to tank your average. He's going to give you decent, about 20 home run power, which we've seen. I don't think there's another level, though. I don't think we should look at this recent hot streak and be like, well, Andrew Vaughn is now finally living up to his potential, and he's going to be like this 30 home run bat. I don't see it. None of the underlying skills indicate that. I mean, the barrel rate is about where it's always been for him. I think he's just, like we talked about with Soderstrom, he's in a hot stretch right now. And even looking at his pull rate, I think one thing that kind of, it's too low. It's 31%. So that's why I don't think we see another level with that power. Because if it's going to help his average, right? Like, I think he's a 260-ish type average player, but I don't think we're going to see another level with the power for him. So
Yeah.
he's fine. I think, again, he should be rostered in 12 teamers. Definitely a solid corner infield option.
Yeah, it is 34% in June, which is up from 30%, the pull rate, 34% in June, up from 30% in May. But again, you're not like, hey, this is great. I know, Eno Saris had mentioned on Rates and Barrels, like he'd be interested in Vaughn if he was on another team that was like, hey, pull the ball 40% of the time.
Right.
And maybe he just doesn't want to do that. Who knows? But I think there's a chance that you're looking at a guy who hits between 250 and 260 with 20 to 25 homers, and that's not a bad corner infield option. It's just if Robert gets traded too, and then Tommy Pham gets traded, and all the competent hitters in the lineup get traded, you're just not going to get the counting stats. But for this moment right now, I think he's worth adding in those formats, and see how long the hot streak lasts, see how long the White Sox lineup stays semi intact, and go from there.
Please show some respect to Nicky Lopez, by the way. I think you're underestimating his ability, okay?
Listen, and Lennon Sosa playing really well the last like 10 days. Jared Kelenic hits leadoff for the Braves now, I think. Saturday and Sunday, Jared Kelenic moved to the leadoff hitter. He started against the last lefty they faced. I don't know that means he's going to start against all lefties. But there's an interesting thing happening right now where, like, we had the Acuna injury and we said, okay, Kelenic is going to earn more playing time. And then we had the Michael Harris injury, and the Braves are just like, all right, this guy's going to play every day. And now we're playing him in center field. And listen, it's been solid. I mean, 265 over the last 2 weeks or the last 10 games with 3 home runs and 6 RBIs isn't crazy. He's up the batting average a little bit. He hit 2 home runs just this past week. There might be something with like a player who we know is talented, right? Who has not put it together, but has the confidence of a team to say, hey, you're a leadoff hitter. Like, you have this opportunity. I don't know that, again, like we just said with Andrew Vaughn, that this is like, hey, this is finally it for Jared Kelenic. We're getting like former Mets prospect Jared Kelenic is back. But I don't know, man. It wouldn't surprise me if he was relevant, 12-team relevant for the rest of the season.
I agree. I think he's a good bet to make. Like, his there's already a stigma against Jared Kelenic, right? Like, oh, people are tired of him, especially with some of his antics and the kicking the water cooler and everything. Like, the fact that he hasn't put it together yet, I think people are, even if they see this, like, oh, the Braves are giving him a shot, it's like, it's Jared Kelenic, whatever. So I think he's still like acquirable, in whether it's in a trade or he's probably still floating out there on waiver wires and 10 and 12 teamers. And like you said, I think this is a former top prospect. He's still only 24 years old. And I know people just say we could get into kind of a rut here with some of these players, like, oh, he's only 24, he's only 25. And then before you know it, they're out of the league. But I think at this point, it's worth at least picking him up and seeing what happens. Michael Harris, it looks like, is going to be out for quite a while. So
they said it's going to be a while.
Yeah. So I think you're going to get at least a month plus here of Jared Kelenic getting near everyday playing time and getting a lot of opportunity at the top of the lineup. Maybe they go out and make a trade if it doesn't work out. But again, I think he's going to get some runway here.
Well, but if they go out and make a trade, the 2 other outfielders are Ramon Laureano and Adam Duvall.
Right.
Like, I mean, you got to replace those 2 guys.
I know they went out. Yeah, I know they went out and got like 5 outfielders in 1 year, but like I don't know if there's enough, like if they're going to do that again. So I think his playing time is fairly secure. And yeah, I think these are the type of bets you want to make in fantasy. You want some of these, like these tarnished name or these tarnished brands, and you want to buy them on the cheap. And we know that there's upside of a really good player in there. There is pedigree. So I think he's definitely worth the pickup. And just a quick note on the Braves, like, I love the way they operate, man. Like, they don't baby their players. Like Kelenic, like, here you go, man. Here's your shot. Like, go to the top of the lineup and play every day. They play all of their players. They don't do load management. Like, everybody plays every day. They're pitchers. They'll bring up from AA. All right, man, just do your thing. So it's like, I just find it interesting how they're just kind of a different organization. They give their players a shot, and I think it can be detrimental sometimes, but I think overall it's a net positive. Like, it gives these players confidence.
Yeah, I totally agree with you on that respect. And I like using the pitcher list like rolling graphs because they have these interesting rolling graphs on like not just barrel rate or whatever, but on like swing decision value, in zone swing decision, out of zone swing decision. And Jared Kelenic has been a little bit more, but been much more aggressive and making much better decisions in the strike zone of late. And I think that that's really valuable for him because we do know that there's some pop in his bat, and no, he's not like a 35 homer guy, but he has enough power. He can do damage. Even if it's doubles in the gap, whatever it is, he's being more aggressive, pulling the ball a little bit more, really trying to kind of attack pitches in the zone, which I like to see. And he's been trending up for, the last like month and a half almost. And I know it hasn't been like spectacular results. So we're not like, jumping, jumping out of the room, but he's hitting over 260 over his last like 25 games. He's striking out 26% of the time over the last 25 games. Like, that's not a crazy high amount. The power is now starting to come a little bit. If he hits it, if he keeps hitting at the top of the lineup, you then have some, run value to add to his profile. And no, he's not going to replace Michael Harris or Ronald Acuna's speed. He stole 13 bases last year. He'll be lucky to get to double digits this year. He has just one, but maybe they run him a little bit more if he's at the top of the lineup. Like, they might be a little more aggressive with things overall. So I'm interested. He's rostered in only 26% of Yahoo leagues. So in a lot of like those types of formats, like, he is worth a gamble. He's somebody you should be picking up right now. Like, I'm curious. Let's throw this out there. If you had George Springer, would you make a move on like the upside of Jared Kelenic, or would you go for what we assume is the safety of George Springer?
George Springer specifically, I can't I don't have him anywhere. I just was really down on him this season, so I'd have to look more into him as far as that exact who I'd want out of those two. But I think just in general, I'm gonna make a bet on the player who is still developing and the younger player in a better lineup, I think. So I probably would lean Kelenic there.
Yeah, I think I agree with you on that. We'll end our hitters with two Rockies because the Rockies have a full stretch of home games. Historically speaking, that had always been like a pick up all your Rockies Sunday night type of situation. It doesn't feel like that anymore. I mean, their best hitter, I guess, is still Nolan Jones and Ryan McMahon, and they're both rostered pretty much everywhere. So the biggest mover in terms of Rocky ads was Michael Toglia. And he's come back up and is 10 of 34 since coming up from the minor leagues. That's a 294 batting average, 1 home run, 9 RBIs, 1 steal. He is somebody who's had opportunities before. He's had 2 stints before and is still a career 186 hitter at the major league level. So I know he was added a lot of places, but it didn't fill me with a ton of confidence. I was more prone to add Charlie Blackmon, who I know doesn't give us the upside that we're used to getting from, Charlie Blackmon back when he was running all the time and, had a little bit more power. But the batting average has been there. Over the last month, he's hitting 307 with 14 runs scored, has stolen 3 bases over the last month, 2 over the last 2 weeks. So I felt like if I'm going to get 7 games at home, I'd rather take Charlie Blackmon, who still hits at the top of the order, is hitting for a high batting average, might swipe a base or two. Were you in on either of these two guys or any of the Rockies bats with the full week ahead?
I feel a little bit embarrassed, Eric. I'll be honest. I picked up Michael Toglia in all of my fab leagues.
Oh yeah.
And I thought he would be more popular, but I got like in my main event league, I bid 13 for him and it was uncontested. Nobody else wanted Michael Toglia. So maybe I'm a little too optimistic here, but the bottom line is he's playing 7 games. This is really just for this week. I'm not talking about Michael Toglia as a fantasy asset rest of season. But for this week, he plays 7 games when there wasn't a lot of teams that were playing that are scheduled for 7.
Yes, agreed.
He's playing all of his games at home, which we very rarely get that, or at least so far. We haven't gotten a full week of Coors Field. And the other thing with Coors Field, I know you said that maybe we're not as like enthusiastic about Rockies this season, but Coors Field hasn't heated up yet. This week, it's going to be in the 90s.
Okay.
That ballpark, I think we're going to see a lot of runs scored this week in that ballpark. So I wanted a piece of that. Toglia is a switch hitter, so they're going to play him. He has played every day since they brought him back up. He's got a little bit of pop, has a stolen base. So just purely a volume and schedule play.
Sure.
And I've learned that actually. I started taking advantage of Coors Field like that because of Scott Pianowski. That was one of the first things that I learned from Scott reading his content, is that you always want to take advantage of Coors Field. I've done that for years with a lot of success. So I'll take a gamble on a guy like Toglia. I agree. Blackman wasn't available for me anywhere. So I would have picked him up because he does hit leadoff and he's even getting some run against lefties here. Again, Charlie Blackman, the player himself, like we know what there's nothing exciting about him at this point in his career, but give me a bunch of at-bats in Coors Field in the middle of June, I'm in. So I'm still on the Rockies train.
And I've fallen for Toglia in the past because the walk rates have been pretty solid in the minor league. So he's a plate discipline guy to a certain extent. So I hear you. I guess I just maybe been burned once before and was like, I'm not going to do it again. A couple interesting names just to keep in mind if you're listening to this Monday afternoon and you have the opportunity to make some claims for this week. Jacob Stallings is now the starting catcher in Colorado due to the Elias Diaz injury. So again, 7 games at home. If you're in a 2-catcher format, or you just lost, who knows what happens with William Contreras, or you're waiting on Wilson Contreras to come back, or whatever, or you lost JT Realmuto, Stallings for a week might not be terrible. And then just keep an eye on Hunter Goodman, because Hunter Goodman was a catcher who they brought up and was playing outfield, but wasn't really playing. But now he is the only other catcher on the roster besides Jacob Stallings, the active roster. So it seems like Hunter Goodman will be the backup catcher. So if this is a guy who, like, if you're in a Yahoo format where people gain catcher eligibility after 5 games, and he gains catcher eligibility, but is also playing games in the outfield, and so he gets 4 or 5 starts a week, when you get these Coors weeks for a guy like that, that could add an extra layer of value to him. In NFBC formats and 2-catcher formats, it might take a little while for him to get catcher eligibility, which might take a little while for him to gain that kind of value. But he is a name I think people should, just keep in mind. We're going to go to pitchers real quick to end this one off. I lumped these 3 rookies together just to kind of ask you preferences. It's Drew Thorpe, Cade Povich, or DJ Herz. Scott and I talked about Drew Thorpe and Cade Povich last week. DJ Herz was somebody we mentioned on our streaming show on Wednesday, and Scott and I were both tepid on him streaming against the Braves. Obviously, that worked out perfectly fine for him because he had 13 strikeouts. He is a guy who always had some reliever risk due to some command issues, but the swing and miss was never a question with him. He has great stuff. He just walks a lot of guys. We saw Cade Povich not pitch well in his first start and then pitch tremendously in his second start. We saw Drew Thorpe pitch well in his first start and pitch terrible in his second start. How are you ranking these 3 guys if you had to rank them? If they're all on your wire, where are you gravitating first?
So I put Drew Thorpe last, and this is not me like thinking that he's never going to be anything, or like, if you have him in Dynasty, like I think you sell him off. I just think there's nothing that he's shown so far that makes me feel great, especially given the team context, that I really want to mess with that, especially like maybe in a 15-teamer, I'm looking at him as a streamer, but not anything less than that. So it's really, for me, between DJ Herz and Cade Povich. And I think the job security is better with DJ Herz. I mean, the Nationals have no reason not to just roll with him the rest of the season. And what he showed in that start this past weekend, obviously super impressive. He joined, I think it was Greg Maddux and Clayton Kershaw, as the only pitchers to have like 13 strikeouts and the amount of pitches that he did. He went 13 strikeouts, 0 walks. Like, I know it wasn't against great competition, but I don't care who you're playing. If you put up 13 strikeouts and 0 walks, like, you've got some ability.
For sure.
And I'm always going to follow the strikeouts too.
Yeah, me too.
Pitchers, I think when I'm evaluating pitchers, especially young ones, the first thing that I'm looking for is, can they miss bats? Right? Like,
Mhm.
I think a lot of pitchers, they can figure out, like, sometimes it's just a little tweak or just like something clicks where the command gets to an acceptable level. I mean, look at like a guy like Tyler Glasnow was kind of a similar type. I'm not saying DJ Herz is Tyler Glasnow, but similar type idea. Guy was striking out the world, but was having command issues. But he figured it out. And though DJ Herz wasn't like a top prospect or anything, I mean, he's always put up good strikeout numbers in the minors. So I'm willing to see what he has here. The Nationals really seem to be doing something with their pitchers. Look at the pitchers that they have this season. We've historically thought, at least I have thought, of the Nationals as kind of behind the rest of the league in terms of pitching development. But
Mhm.
look at what Mackenzie Gore is doing this season.
Yeah.
Mitchell Parker
Jake
has turned into a good
Jake
pitcher.
Irvin's been really good
Jake
for a while.
Irvin's been really good. And now you've got DJ Herz, who's really flashing. So I know they added Sean Doolittle as like a pitching consultant in the offseason. Who knows if that has anything to do with it? But I have to imagine they've done something where they're getting the best out of these pitchers. So I give a slight lean to Herz over Povich just because I think there's a job security and because of the swing and miss. I think Povich is definitely worth a spec ad. He's got a couple tough matchups coming up here. I should mention that, but I know he goes to the Yankees this week, so not ideal. But I think both of them, if they're out there in your league, I think both of them are worth pickups just to see where it goes with them.
Yeah, it's funny. We did this last week. I had Povich last behind Thorpe, and that was when Bradish was healthy. And so I just thought, I don't think that this is also before his second start. But I just thought there wasn't as long a leash. Like Thorpe was going to be up. The White Sox called Thorpe up to pitch him for the whole rest of the year. I now think Povich has a little bit of a longer leash because now he's competing with Suarez and Cole Irvin. He's not competing with what starter do the Orioles bring in. And so I think that gives Povich a little bit more of a leash. I still am not really I still think I might like Thorpe a little better. I think Thorpe has an elite pitch and Povich doesn't. And I tend to want to gravitate toward a pitcher who I know has one pitch when they're in trouble. They can really kind of rely on that pitch and get out of it. I think what we saw with Thorpe in this week's start was his changeup wasn't getting chases out of the zone. And that's just an adjustment to major league hitters, right? Like minor leagues, if you're throwing a great pitch, and even if it's a pitch you throw 60% of the time, like minor league hitters are going to chase it out of the zone if it looks appetizing a little bit more. Major league hitters, if you start showing the same location and the same movement on it, they're going to say, like, I know what you're trying to do. You're starting this change at my thighs. It's not going to be a strike. But I think that Thorpe's changeup is good enough, and I think his command with it is good enough that he'll be able to move it to different spots and command it in a way that gives me a little bit more hope for him. And I agree with you. I think Herz has the lowest ceiling or the lowest floor of these three, because if the command leaves him, it's going to be impossible to play him. But I would much rather add somebody who I think could make a huge impact if things break right. And hopefully you're not having to bid a crazy amount. The problem is with that start, you probably had to. But he'll have some run, and you'll try to play the matchups and see if it works out for you. So I would go Herz, Thorpe, Povich, I believe. Somebody who I thought would be rostered in more Yahoo leagues after his last start was Taj Bradley, who's still rostered in just 42% of Yahoo leagues. I wrote about Taj Bradley in my last in a column I did last week where I used like a custom leaderboard of like pitchers who over the last month had above league average strikeout minus walk rates, swinging strike rates, stuff plus numbers, and then we're rostered in under 50% of Yahoo leagues. And Taj Bradley popped on that. And I still think his command is iffy. And I don't mean that in terms of walks. I mean that in terms of like the location of his pitches changes week to week. Like, I don't think he has a clear approach and a clear attack plan and a clear ability to execute consistently that approach, but the approach we saw in his last start was exactly the approach he should execute, which was fastballs up in the zone, a lot of splitters beneath the zone. He really relied on those two pitches. It was tremendous for him. He should be rostered because that's the type of guy that even if you're not sure you're going to get a consistent outing from him, you can keep him on your bench for a start or two and see if he can turn this into a run. But the talent is there. I just need to see the consistency, and one start doesn't make me think he's got it figured out. But I would just like, he just needs to watch this start over and over again and be like, this is my approach. This is the approach I need to have. And hopefully he can execute that because the talent is there.
That's wild. I cannot believe Taj Bradley is only 46% rostered in Yahoo. I thought it would have been more upwards of like 70 to 80. Yeah. Especially like he's a big name, was a big prospect. People are excited about him going into this year. Listen, if you are listening to this podcast, stop what you're doing. Pull over if you have to. I don't care. Stop what you're doing. Go pick up Taj Bradley or make an offer for him. Because I really believe, Eric, he is one tweak away from becoming a fantasy ace. We've seen the upside with him, particularly in his last start where he went 7 innings, 0 earned runs, and 11 Ks. I know we've seen the bad as well, where he got blown up by the Orioles a couple weeks ago. But at the end of the day, we have a pitcher who's put up a 32% K rate against an 8% walk rate. Now, when I'm evaluating pitchers, yeah, we could get into the spin rate, the pitch mix, and we could really get in the weeds, right? The stuff plus, all of this. But when I look at K minus walk percentage, that gets me like 75% of the way there of telling me how good a pitcher is. And Bradley, with that K minus walk percentage, is like among pitchers, I think with at least 30 innings pitched, starters with 30 innings pitched, he's like top 10, right? So I think it really is with him, just like maybe the last start, what he did, he went almost 80% fastball splitter and really ditched his other two secondary pitches. And the fastball and splitter are his two best ones. He's got a 122 Steph plus in the fastball, a 121 on the splitter. So I don't know if that was just a matchup thing or if this is just his new approach, but I trust that he's going to find that and that the Rays especially will be able to get that out of him. I think he's someone that needs to be rostered across all formats, 10 teamers. I don't care. Like, I really do believe in him and think he can be an ace.
Yep. I like your idea of like, as somebody who writes about pitching all the time, I am guilty of overcomplicating things at time when you're trying to like get into the nitty gritty of it. And sometimes that's the difference in just like with a guy like Taj Bradley, it's those details can be the difference between is he a fantasy ace or is he somebody who tantalizes me start per start, but that's not, should I roster him or not? Right. It's like you should roster him. The getting into the weeds is like, what is the ultimate upside, right? If I'm trading for him, what am I actually willing to give up? Like, how good is he? But I think he's good enough that he should be on rosters. I think the same thing, not to this level, but I think in deeper formats, like Tobias Myers is somebody that I overlooked. And I think he deserves to be more than just like hey, he's pitching against the worst team, pick him up. Like, I think he is a serviceable enough 15-team league regular streamer where like maybe you don't keep him on your roster every week, but I think this is a guy who has a pitch mix that interests me enough that like he's not going to get a ton of strikeouts, but he has a really flat fastball that he throws up in the zone more and more, and flat fastballs miss a lot of bats and do really well up in the zone. He's cut back on his cutter usage. And is throwing his changeup a lot more, which I think is intriguing because it has flashed some interesting stuff, the changeup. So there's not like a huge fantasy ceiling here, but I think in 15 teamers, like when he has 2 start weeks, this is a guy I think he's interesting enough that like I understand why he was picked up for his schedule this week, and I understand why he was added. And I think that I'm trying to go. I'm pulling up the schedule right now because I'm in my waiver wire article. And so this week, I had him pretty high up in my rankings because he faces the Angels and then the Padres. And I know the Padres are a solid team, but I still think that's a pretty solid 2-start week. Like when you start off with the Angels and the Brewers are a good team, like that could be 2 wins for him. And I'm going to say this and regret it because I'm going to jinx it, but like I don't think he gets blown up. Like I don't think he's that type of guy. So I think if he has a good start against, the Angels, and then he gives you like a quality start against the Padres, like that's a really good week in a 15-team league.
Yeah, I agree in the sense that he's a good streamer. He's not a 12-team play at this point. I'd be surprised if he is at any time soon. I mean, he just doesn't have the swing and miss. But he's a good streamer. He reminds me kind of like, not that they have like the exact same mix, but just kind of in that same tier as Colin Ray, his teammate. Like, right. A guy like I'm not going to start a lot of the time, but Colin Ray had 2 starts last week, both home starts against mediocre teams, and he pitched really well. And I think those are the types of opportunities for you to get value from these types of players. I'd be a little leery. I could see it in a 15-teamer giving him that 2-step here. I don't love that they're both on the road, but yeah, I can see it. And the next week he's home against Chicago again in a 15-teamer. I probably will roll the dice in that one.
Yeah. And then last pitcher who I wanted to add on here because he was aggressive, like he was one of the most rostered pitchers or most added pitchers in NFBC formats, and it's because Carson Spiers is moving into the Reds rotation. In 5 appearances out of the bullpen this year, he has a 2.33 ERA with a 1.19 WHIP, just a 10.7% swinging strike rate, which as a reliever gives me a little bit of pause because you'd expect the pure stuff to play up a little bit more in a relief role. He has 6 pitches that he throws relatively regularly. He has a 4-seamer and a sinker. He has a sweeper and a tighter slider. He has a changeup and a cutter. And if you go to pitcher list, like the 4-seam is below average from their PLV grades, but everything else, the sinker is an above average pitch. The sweeper is a league average pitch. The changeup is a bad pitch. The cutter is above average. The tight slider is above average. Now we're working in small sample sizes here. But I think it's worth at least doing a deeper dive or paying attention to a pitcher who has that deep of an arsenal of pitches, and a few of them are plus or at least league average. And Eno Saris, who we know is, his stuff plus is his baby. And when Sammy and I on Catcher's Corner were talking to him about a guy like Chris Bassett, Eno said when a pitcher has like 6 pitches, you throw stuff plus out the window to a certain extent. Like it's then about the depth of the arsenal and not just the overall stuff. I still hate the home ballpark, hate Reds pitching at Great American. So I don't really know like what my overall level of interest in Spiers is, possibly like as a streamer in good matchups in 15-team leagues. But, his sinker being his best fastball is fine against right-handed pitching. The sweeper is a pretty solid pitch that has an almost 19% swinging strike rate. So yeah, maybe he could be interesting in deeper formats as a stream, but I was surprised how much he was added this weekend.
Yeah, that's going to be a no for me, dog. I just can't get behind a Reds pitcher. I mean, he's pitching half his game in Cincinnati. The weather's warming up. No prospect pedigree. And maybe I focus a little bit too much on this, but I'm not seeing like some big change where all of a sudden he like was flashing amazing skills. Like he's projected to be kind of like a back end swingman type of pitcher. So I didn't even really consider him in Fab this week. Maybe I'm that's a blind spot of mine, but I'm not chasing that.
Yeah, I think, listen, he was announced as a starter. People look back at his last bulk relief appearance, which was against the Cubs, 5 2/3, 4 hits, 7 strikeouts, 32.2% CSW, not 12 whiffs in that start. And you're like, okay, like the cutter was good. The sweeper was good. Like, yeah, maybe I think people were looking at like, maybe there's something here. And again, maybe there is, but for me, it's wholly matchup dependent and wholly 15-team leagues right now. Like if I saw him in a good stream away from home in a 15-team league, I would consider it. other than that, as Scott always says, like he has to pitch his way onto my roster. Like I need to see 3-4 starts where I get to the point where I'm like really afraid to miss out, and I don't know that we're going to get there with Carson Spiers.
Listen, if Spears, if he's pitching, in Oakland, that'll probably be the only time that I'll be
or
like,
against the White Sox in Chicago,
or against, even there, I'd be like, I don't know, Andrew Vaughn, but no, it's really not something I'd want to mess with.
Agreed. Before we get out of here, why don't you tell the people again, remind them where they can listen to your podcast?
Yep. So again, my podcast is called The Fantasy Baseball Beat. It's part of the Triple Play Fantasy Network. Go check us out wherever you get your podcasts. Just put in Triple Play Fantasy. We've got a lot of great podcasts that are part of that feed. So please give us a listen. You can find me on Twitter. Yes, it's always going to be Twitter to me.
Yes.
At Torres Takes. And that's what I'm up to these days.
That's the ball game. You can always find me on Twitter at Samski NYC. You can check my Mixing It Up article, which will come out on Wednesday morning. And the Rotoworld Fantasy Baseball ad drop video on YouTube will come out Tuesday this week. So make sure you check that out. Scott and I will be back on Thursday for the Rotoworld Baseball, next episode of the Rotoworld Baseball Show. Please remember to rate and review wherever you can. It does really help this podcast and all podcasts to kind of really get seen by other people. So make sure you do that. And we'll check you next week, later this week for the Rotoworld Baseball Show.